welcome everybody. We're really looking forward to getting started with our fifth SOC Masterclass. And just so in case of some of you are new to CyberProof, we are a world leader in MDR and managed XDR services. So this is our fifth time that we're running a SOC Masterclass, and we're really pleased to be joined by people from across the globe. I'm seeing there are participants from North America, from India, UK, Spain, Germany. So a good representation. So Tony, I think we're going to kind of get kicked off. You want to kind of introduce the session, and we'll hopefully have our first guest speaker joining as soon as possible. How do you want to play this? We're
absolutely.
We're in live, so we're gonna.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll take it. Thanks everybody for joining. So today, hopefully, we'll have Karenann Terrell joining us shortly. We are trying to figure out what happened here, but let me go ahead and introduce the topic. If not, I have tremendous amount of experience working with Karenann. Can probably give you some of the insights I've learned from her over that time period myself. But let me tell you a little bit about Karenann. Karenann has a very unique perspective because she serves on.
By the way, Tony, Karen just joined us now.
Okay, fantastic. So
can you hear us, Karenann?
I can, and I'm here. Good morning, guys.
Good to have you.
Good morning. So we just dived into the introduction. Thanks a lot. So Karenann serves on various high-profile advisory boards, including Google. She advises tech companies around the world, particularly startups. But I think what's most important is during her rich careers with Walmart, GSK, and many others, she's developed relationships with many people that are now holding roles of CIOs and CISOs in other large companies, and keeps in regular touch with these folks. And as part of that, she gets a sense of what's happening on the ground and is able to, guide and help them, but also share that with you today. In today's session, we'll explore what CISOs and CIOs, frankly, are currently feeling about the emerging challenges. We're in a time where there's an increasing amount of threat. The hacker capabilities are going up. And today, more than ever, CISOs are playing a critical role in mitigating those risks of cyber attacks. CISOs also must stay up to date with these best practices and work closely with other departments inside their organizations to ensure that everybody is aware. So the importance of CISOs working across the leadership spectrum is becoming more and more important. In addition, you'll see that the industry has experienced a number of shocks over the last few years, the most recent being the economy. And this is at the same time we're going through these major digital and cloud transformation initiatives that were fueled by the pandemic. So what's changing here in 2023? How are CISOs handling this? And we'll drill down on that a little bit today. So thanks again, Karenann, for joining.
Tony?
To kind of kick this off, we'll start with a question. What are you hearing from CISOs as emerging some of the great challenges? But before we'll grab a quick poll from the audience and then get their point of view on what they're seeing the impact of security in their organization. So Howard, do you want to help us with the poll?
Sure. So here's our new poll. Can you see it on the screen here?
Yep, we can see.
Great. So first one is, how much of an impact has the current economic climate had on security overall in your organization? There's no right answer. Please answer now. We'll give it a few moments to see people are giving a response. Thank you, everyone. Looks like there's a good amount of opinions coming up here. Okay, let's show the results. So wow, this is it's pretty high here. 42% of people participating, so they've felt a significant impact. 38% shortly behind is somewhat, not much of an impact 16 and no impact 4. So what are your thoughts on that?
Let me hand it over to Karenann, because I think she's got some great insights from her conversation. Karenann.
You know, it doesn't surprise me at all. And I think if we were able to have a live conversation with people, Tony, you are absolutely right. I've been talking to a lot of CISOs and decision makers in the security area. I'm hearing several themes, and not to keep the themes too high, because I know that we'll have a chance to dive into it. I'm hearing that because there is a change in the trajectory of risk, prioritization for people has been so much more important. So if you think at a CISO level of programmatically, deployments that you have been doing in order to raise the maturity of the SOC, of intelligence gathering, threat hunting, preventable strategies, prioritizing the specifics around there is just never more important. And the cost pressures that have come because of expectations about what's going on with recessions. It just really has, office of the CISO have really embraced a much more dynamic and important role around prioritization. The second thing that I am definitely hearing is around risk management. And risk management is the job. But remember, CISOs have responsibilities around compliance, putting those pieces in place for the organization, and secondly, managing the overall risk. Well, think about the dynamic environment that we have, new characters that are involved with regards to risk, needs for speed of responding in risk management. They have been there, but what has really taken a change in trajectory is around risk management and how you define that. And then finally, this myth that somehow with all the tech layoffs, boy, there's no more talent shortage is just ridiculous if you're working at an enterprise level and you have open roles. Last published stat, I think, was like over 700,000 open security roles. So I'm still hearing the continual issues around talent shortage and the number of open roles that exist. Maybe the turnover and the change and the mobility has changed a bit, but the talent shortage issue has not. So that's what I've been hearing out in the wild, per se, with regards to security.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know I just saw, I think it was last week, Accenture laid off, I think, 19,000 people. So we saw it a lot in the tech, the Facebook and those. Now we're seeing it in some of the providers. And I know we've been working closely with Microsoft, and they've been going through rounds and rounds of it. So it's interesting. But as you mentioned, in cybersecurity, we're not seeing a whole lot of excess talent. So it's still a major gap, and probably will be across the board, right? Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned, prioritization, and prioritization is tough, right? So it's one of those things, if you can do it around risk and how you mitigate. But one of the things that I know we've discussed in the past is there are opportunities to create some synergies between what's going on between security and some of the rest of the IT organizations that can help them maybe save money at the same time they're going through these transformation processes. What do you think some of the leaders can do to create these synergies? Where have you seen some of these ideas coming from? And can you comment about how these can maybe relieve some of the pressure on budgets and have an impact as we go into this economic period?
So it's and your audience, I'm sure, will be at the top of the food chain with regards to thought leaders, Tony. But there are, first, cloud transformation will continue, and the hybrid cloud is the strategy of choice. Whether your company got into a hybrid cloud strategy, accidentally through serendipity, or whether there was a top-down strategy to drive a hybrid cloud approach, that lands at security's door from a ability to accelerate and ability to get very fully into a more cloud native environment for your organization, very heavy. Because security and security strategies for integrating an Azure, an AWS, and a Google Cloud strategy is just absolutely fundamental and very different than the way that we secured our internal environments. And having the skills there can really be the arbitrator of how fast a strategy can go. And make no mistake, CIOs have got their foot on the gas of cloud strategies. I think that is something that you can't just get to from a security point of view. If you are not there from a skills point of view, you've got to actually enable that, because security could be the governor on how fast a cloud strategy should go, which is incredibly important to a digital transformation posture for any single company. And I don't see anything in recession that's slowing that down. Now, CIOs are working on cloud costs, but the speed at which they're transitioning their environment in cloud is not one of those mindsets that they have. They are going to use this time of recession. I think that that's one. The second, with regard to prioritization, is that maybe a little bit less popular for the audience, but I'm going to say it anyways, because it's on the mind of the CIO, which is there are cost management strategies that address the ability to actually look at some of the services that are available externally, especially through offshore providers, Eastern Europe providers, Israeli skilled providers that can do that. Number one, it fills the talent shortage issue, but number two, it talks about the cost gap. And I think this is the reason that I love CyberProof. CyberProof has the ability with a CISO to meet them where they are and basically to say, how can we help you with regards to cost and capability? So it's not a old IT paradigm of outsourcing. Good God, that is never going to work in the security side of things, but where you can tap expertise in a much better cost point, where you already have large openings from a talent point of view, is something that the top CISOs are really embracing and understanding. It helps them with costs, and it's going to help them with the overall strategy associated with people. So I would bring those two things up because they are in the priorities of what are we going to do about cost and how are we going to actually manage.
There's a couple of things too I've noticed just in our discussions with customers. I know we have a couple of these in common. There are some technical synergies too. Things like when we move on to cloud, the building data lakes and looking at log data storage. These are areas where we've seen the clients and cybersecurity team be able to maybe create some synergies or reduce cost there. And there's a whole category of things like log optimization coming in that the cost of SIMs that we've seen the abilities to save money as we go through these strategies, non-value added type of costs as well. So
dwell on that one for a minute, because as a security professional, what you may be thinking through is, oh gosh, if I go to a set of services, what I'm going to do is lose control instead of have the direct control of people within. And in fact, what you're able to do is tap into a set of capabilities that have already been built. That one that you mentioned about cloud, is the cost of cloud, and the acceleration of the cost of cloud does not have to happen if you're being very intelligent about how you're deploying Chronicle or what's happening with Sentinel, those types of thought processes around what do you bring into expensive cloud and how do you use that, and what happens in log optimization so that you don't have these huge giant data lakes that you're paying an ongoing monthly fee for. It's really important as a security pro that you've got a mindset around what is possible to actually do the job as well as keep the costs under management. So that's a really important one if you're trying to manage costs so that you can invest in innovation and defending.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You probably have a great perspective. I found sometimes the CISOs and the CIOs don't do that architecting together, right? The environment for security may be architected somewhat, particularly the security operations environment. So how do we? There are opportunities for doing that planning up front and trying to look for those synergies as well, right?
Yeah, the CTO and the CISO. My experience at GSK and at Walmart, the CIO and the CTO, the CISO and the CTO are critical in relationships. And I know there's a bunch of groans going on out there in the audience as they're saying, oh my gosh, the CTO, he's just working on the operations of things. Well, see, here's the thing. CISOs depend on that operating environment in order to actually be more attuned and more capable in the threat hunting, in the AI, the use of information from AI in order to predict and prevent. And so that is, you're right on. The CIO may arbitrate it, but it's the CTO, it's that head of the operating layer and the CISO that's critical. And recently, I've actually heard of CISOs that are moving and getting much more involved, either collaboratively or managerially responsible into that technology layer because it's so important from a security point of view.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We're seeing in this new cloud world, there's a lot of opportunities for architecting and thinking differently. And we've seen some of the more progressive CISOs start working early with that. Even the ones that didn't are now looking back and saying, how can I get some of the synergies out of these environments that we've developed over the years, particularly as security operations moves to cloud native architectures. So let me shift gears a little bit. When it comes to risk, a lot of CISOs focus on the risk of compliance is risk to them, right? The risk of being sued for not being compliant. So if you're in a database, there are huge fines. But as we move forward, we're seeing the risk of an actual cyber attack, a ransomware attack, become more and more important to these folks. What are you seeing? Is there a shift in kind of the mindset you're seeing? Has a recession played into any other shifts or related to that? But what's the word on the ground? Are we spending more time figuring out how to protect ourselves from the actual attack, or most on compliance still?
So unhappily, the threat of internal audit and third-party audit and the compliance-related components to make sure that you have good maturity, unhappily, we're never where we are supposed to be there, and that is a continuing journey. This is the point that where prioritization really meets risk management, because you as a CISO, you as a SOC leader have multiple masters. One is the legal audit side of things from a compliance point of view, which is incredibly important. But if you worked your strategy absolutely perfectly and targeting from nation state or zero-day exploits or just new trends that are happening with regards to risks in the environment, you're not equally balanced on both of those, you're in trouble, because the breach is going to come in through something that is that could be more sophisticated, that needs more intelligence and more collaboration within your SOC of where that where expertise can come in, versus just the continuing program closure of compliance related pieces. And I know this is the hardest thing in the world, because one is the blocking and tackling compliance that your organization needs to do in order to be baseline capable and safe. But for CISOs, because of the complexity of the environment, there needs to be the walking and chewing gum at the same time, feeling in a much, much more profound way, which is why I really go to get some help on your baseline, close the baseline issues that you have, and make sure in partnering on the baseline that you're getting a 1-2 punch. You're getting somebody who can help you on the capability at a platform level for threat hunting, identification of zero-day risk, those types of things, at the same time that they're providing the operating environment that helps you. Because I just don't think that it is an option, and certainly the purse strings are not nearly as loose as they have been maybe in the last 5 years for cybersecurity. But I don't think it's an option to throw your focus as a CISO onto compliance while you leave the other thing. You've got to have, at a prioritization level, that risk management on both.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. I talked to a lot of definitely the more technical CISOs want to spend more time on, I think, the more technical issues, but get absorbed in the compliance because it's black and white. It's easy to sell to the board, right? You're either compliant or you're not, and if you're not compliant, you can't sell your product, or you can't.
Hey, boards are getting a lot smarter about the questions that they ask. They're getting a lot more savvy because there's pressure on them to have within their own ranks cybersecurity expertise that's coming in the US, even in Europe. To have someone who really understands that environment. Get out ahead of that as a CISO. You've got to lay out a strategy that is both. But you're right. If you're someone that doesn't necessarily come from that much more technical base on all of it, you've got somebody on your team who is. You've got to exhibit the language from a management point of view of balance. You've got to be that person that is showing back to the board that you can do both instead of one or the other, even if you're getting pressure from your board just to do the one, because it's having that baseline while you are protecting these much more hyper threats that are showing themselves in our environment. You know, that's the stuff that is about longevity of career. You've got to be able to do both.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, but I'll stay with a little bit of the compliance as well as other topics. So CyberProof, as you know, works with more enterprise level clients. So we tend to get clients that work across multiple international geographies. And we've noticed some differences in, in the States versus Europe versus Asia versus Australia, part of Asia. But I was just there, so I know that. But what are you seeing? Are there variations? Can you comment a little bit on what you're seeing maybe across the board in terms of what are these large companies doing to handle these and a variation working across these, or what are you seeing in different regions?
So I'm gonna throw it back to you a little bit, Tony, because your point of view is Southeast Asia is thinking about security in a way that's different potentially than what you're seeing of your European clients, especially because of the expertise that CyberProof has in Israel and the clients that they're serving. So maybe you'd start and I'll add some color afterwards.
Okay. All right. So what we've noticed, particularly with these large projects where we need the companies are trying to standardize security operations, maybe at the corporate level, but then roll it out to different regions, is Europe, for example, is very, very focused on people. GDPR is driving a lot of the policies, got very large fines and driving that. And we tended to have it was good that it's the EU, but a most restrictive things. So regulation variation between countries is creating part of the challenge for us. And so we have GDPR, probably one of the most restrictive, and US laws are adopting things like California, which are driving things like GDPR, becoming more similar. But in places like Asia and Australia, the regulation is catching up. So we've had challenges when we try and architect solutions that meet all these different requirements of different countries. So that's a key one. Another one is just the technology variations that we see between different countries. We're trying as CISOs to standardize much of the technology. We're seeing variations in different regions. And then the third, you mentioned it, but we're seeing talent, massive variations in talent. Countries that have always had maybe a security problem, like Israel, are developing talent, which is amazing, but other countries that have not had this experience or concern in the past are catching up, right? So we are, security is one of those areas, particularly at the higher level. It's as much about mindset as it is about experience, right? So trying to find that talent. And we've done a couple of unique things in the States. For example, we've started training veterans coming out of the military on cyber defense and things like that. But those are some of the, I'd say from our vantage point, we're seeing some of this want to do centralize and things, but we're seeing variations, particularly driven by regulation and talent availability in the various regions that drive us.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I was just reading the article of CISA of the Jan Easterling's announcement about a new set of leaders that were being added into the cybersecurity advisory. And knowing a few of the folks that are in that group, I can just really see that the government-related piece in United States, in order to pull business more collaboratively together and in an advisory role of the government actions and the company actions, is at a higher level than it has ever been before. CISOs do a beautiful job of, I would say, just below the radar communication. And I know that to be a fact in Europe. I know that to be a fact in North America. If you're a CISO, that environment that Tony just talked about is why you're answering the question of my environment's becoming more complex. GDPR is basically hitting its age with large, highly material fines, focused first on technology companies, definitely. But if you think that GDPR was intended to keep large tech companies in check in Europe, that was one potentially of the strategy, but it is to protect the citizens and what is happening with their data and the availability of that. So that European data focus is providing you, more complexity. What happens when that data is in the cloud is the question for the CISO, the CIO for sure, but for the CISO. While in North America, it's a much more complex environment. While the Ukrainian-Russian war is going on, while there is all this language happening with regards to China and what is happening there. And by the way, one of the inside baseball stories that I pick up constantly is, I don't know a global multinational that does not have a particular focus on a China strategy. It is really like either it's a China for China, we're going to isolate ourselves completely from China so that there isn't any ability of China to get back into our environment, or there is a particular focus in and around China. So it's multinational strategies where you are selling into multiple customers is what's making this so hard. And I love the European squad that CyberProof has, because they are some of the very best talent in the world. It's the reason why Microsoft places its security product center into Israel as well. I mean, and even Israel is having its moment in terms of civil unrest going on right now. More complexities that we have to navigate through, but it is. I would just echo that the environments are complex and they're not always homogeneous and consistent in terms of what the focus is. So again, risk managing through all of that, when you have to be much more dynamic on your priorities when you're looking at that risk management environment.
Yeah, by the way, for those in the audience, if you do have questions, go ahead and pass a few in here. We'll try and capture them at the end. I'm really curious to get the feedback from the audience on what they're thinking and give them an opportunity to ask you questions. But speaking of sudden changing dynamics, GPT, where did that come from, and what impact do you think that's going to have? Yeah,
it's the overnight success that's 3 years in the making, as people say. What it has done is place access and availability into the realm of not just professional enterprise workers, but just basically the world. If you look at the at least one-time user base of generative AI, and that's, Chat GPT, that is out in the world today, what it has said to everybody is, beyond the curiosity of, sing me a song in the Taylor Swift about my, board bio, which is a real thing that I heard this morning. And beyond just that, it has once and for all demonstrated to a very, very wide swath of the world what is going to be possible through AI. And AI had always been something that was in the untouchable and the unreachable. The way that, the iPhone demonstrated to everybody what mobile data was actually going to do, because the iPhone made it completely available to the world. If you could get an iPhone, just the same way as generative AI is available to the world, if you can get access to AI. The real challenge, I think, in generative AI, beyond the do we block it or do we not block it, and the real concern in risk management complexities around what do we do about our IP. We can't have our workforce asking questions into a model that is being trained externally that is going to leak any of our IP. And I certainly understand that. But there is a much bigger question about AI that a CISO and a CIO and a chief counsel, a lead counsel in a company have got to deal with, which is how are we actually going to look at our data with regards to models that are being generated, whether the models are being fed externally or whether models are of our own making internally. And, with the announcements recently from Google, other players that are getting immediately into the AI game, this is not going to be a one model for everybody, but it's, make no mistake, there's not going to be 4 guys in a garage in Stanford in their bunny slippers figuring out how to disrupt AI. AI and AI infrastructure is going to be a very big moat around which we are going to have to figure out as enterprise technologists how to play into that. And a CISO needs to be on their front foot. They need to be listening to trends across the board, not using big, blunt instruments about AI, but being very, very nuanced about where your data will be, who will have access to your data on training runs, and what that could mean to your company, both on the opportunity side, big time on the opportunity side, which is where enterprises and boards are spending a lot of time having discussion. How are we going to harness this initially in midterm and long term for our benefit. And as well as on the risk side of things, of what happens, negatively if our data is consumed and munged by machines that are not for our purpose. So being on the front foot of that, learning a lot about the technology is very, very important.
Yeah, you mentioned something about in your about looking at the opportunity side, and I think that's the other flip side is, and this is where security comes in, is the people that look at what could happen on the bad side as well. And that kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation around talent shortage and mindset and people that fill these security roles. And I think you mentioned that although we're seeing layoffs and we're seeing maybe less hiring, we are still seeing a huge shortage in talent over here. The other thing I noticed about security is, as we go through cloud transformation, a lot of our security talent was trained in infrastructure-like jobs. They were managing firewalls and things like this, where in the new world, everything is code. And there's potentially changes in the kind of talent that or the training of talent. The people that had experience with security are now needing to have new skills to be able to operate in these new worlds. What's your perspective maybe on the talent shortage, some of the things that are happening in the industry to solve some of these problems? So,
man, if I had the answer to this, because I think that the shortage in security is a microcosm of the shortage in all of tech, but it is a much more important shortage because of the risk, the reputational, and the real risks that could be posed to companies. It's obvious that fighting amongst one another for the very best talent is not going to solve a talent problem that has 700,000 plus US openings in security. It's just not going to happen. It's expanding the pie is very critical. And so, how do you expand the pie? How do you make more? I was always very fascinated by UST's approach when I was at Walmart, using the Step It Up program, where they basically focused on a population of relevant and capable individuals who did not have the skills and the experience, and put them through the Step It Up program as a cohort into a rapid upgrade of their skills and giving them direct experience on behalf of the customers that UST used. I love your point earlier of focusing that same type of Step It Up program on veterans, where they already come with security mindsets, giving them the basic capabilities around skills and giving them the basic sets of experience on behalf of companies is definitely something that a CISO or a SOC owner or somebody who's managing risk management in a company can, call you up, Tony, I hope, customer or not, and say, what is that program? Tell me about it. How do I do it? I know that we on this call probably focus on the executive roles, managers, directors, vice presidents, in those roles, but the real battle is being fought on the open roles of people who are day to day, looking at logs, working with the platforms, understanding the detection, and any advantage that you can get on raising, the baseline capabilities of just closing the gap. It's not going to work by having more recruiting people, because there just are not more people out there. And when you do that, what you do is raise the price without necessarily raising the quality of the pool. So I think that's one thing on closing the gap, is doing what you can through, new programs. Either you do that at the university, call up Tony and find out what's going on with Step It Up and how that can apply to you. I think the other piece is expanding into populations that are very underrepresented in security. And the one that I'm most familiar with is women in cyber. And there is a lot that women in cyber are trying to do to be more inviting, to get more women and underrepresented people, frankly, in there. Your direct advocacy and support for the actions that are going on with women in cyber, and I'm talking to the audience here, is also a critical thing. I always say, when women are trying to get more women in security, more women into software engineering or data engineering, it's back in the day, women didn't get women the vote, men gave women the vote. And so the highly represented groups are the ones, when they engage and their allies, they really start to accelerate things for women in cybersecurity. So engage and say to the women that are in your own organization, what are you doing with other women in cybersecurity? How do I support that? How do I elevate it? Because it is in expanding the pool, we've got to get more women and underrepresented people in, and we've got to actually work at that base level. And that's the real winners and losers that I see when I talk to CISOs are people that are using the external lens to say, what are the things that I don't have to do anymore myself because I just have got to close that gap? What can I do that's going to break through in the geographies that I'm represented on, and are working on underrepresented sides of things with their own time and talent in order to help accelerate and raise those efforts?
Great. I have a question from the audience too. I think it's related to talent, but from Harsh, he says, what is the best path to become a CISO for those who are CISSP certified and have a network and security experience for more than 10 years?
Wow, that is a big question. I think the security rating that you have is important. So Harsh, I would ask two questions. Number one is, what is the community that you surround yourself with? Because the stated ambition of I want to be a CISO, I think is an important and necessary, but not sufficient in doing that. I would ask, what is the community that you surround yourself with? And what are you doing in that overall community in order to understand, even if your direct responsibility within the company is not yet there, what are you learning from a shared community? And those communities are not for networking. This is I think the huge gap that exists between people's ambitions and capabilities and the use of these networks. It is not so you can go out and network with people who have jobs. It's to learn from that community, to learn from them what is necessary, and even hopefully trial some of the skills that you're going to need at the next level. Ambition is important, and stating that ambition, but it's really, really not sufficient. So set yourself into the right community, either within your organization where there's a really good cross community regionally, global multinational, or into if you're in Dallas, the Dallas security area, or if you're in Seattle, the Seattle one. I think those things are great places to learn what those next level jobs are. Don't do it just for networking. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. You need it for experience. Tony, would you add anything there?
Yeah, I would. That's a good point. I was going to, but I will. The other thing that I think it's going to be critical is taking the tech speak into business speak and learning the communication. I think you need to, as a CISO, you need to be able to do both. You need to be able to have the mindset we talked about earlier, be able to get deep into the technology, but also convert that into simplified language for the business, because the ability to explain security is super critical skill as well. But it goes back.
We're talking to the board. or chairman to
Right.
the board. You know, a CISO doesn't get a CISO job anymore without there being a board authorization process, at least in a public company, and the private companies that I advise and sit on boards, it's the same. And so that's a great point. That's a great point.
Our city's in banking, so I know that that's one you definitely need to be able to have very good communication. Sure. Right.
So I'm jumping back in here. I'm sorry to break up such an interesting conversation. So I would like to thank Karenann. Really appreciate you joining us today. It was really interesting, and we hope we can have you back again soon. Tony, thank you for being a great host. So we're out of time. Apologies that we're not going to be able to take any more questions. But we're now going to move on to our next session.